All right, welcome everybody to this week's episode of Lions Live. I'm your host, Mike Payton from A to Z Sports Detroit. We are here to talk about a few things as we get ready for the 2026 NFL Combine, which is going to be next week. And free agency is going to be basically the week right after that. So we have a lot going on over the course of the next 14, 21 days. Like this is going to be this is the time of year where you're going to want to put your phone notifications on for beat writers and national NFL insiders, because this is when all the news is going to be coming out during the off season. And then we're going to kind of go into a little bit of a lull there for a minute before the NFL draft happens in late April. But a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff to talk about. Let's jump into it with kind of the biggest news that just happened yesterday. Detroit Lions team president Rod Wood announced that he is going to be retiring from the team after, it's about 10 years as the team president. And there's been a lot of talk about kind of what happens next and, who the Lions should hire. And I know certainly there's a lot of Lions fans that want to hire certain guys, and we'll talk about those. But first, I want to really kind of dig into the differences between team president and the president of football operations. So some teams will split it up that way, where they'll have like a president of football operations, and then they'll have a president of business. Like the Atlanta Falcons just hired Matt Ryan to be their president of football operations. They have another guy on staff who handles all the business, the revenue, the stadium, the jerseys, all that stuff, liaison with the league and whatnot. The Lions don't necessarily have that. They had one guy who would be in charge of just the business side of things. So that really has to be taken into account when you think about who's going to be doing this next job. Rod Wood didn't touch the roster, had basically nothing to do with it whatsoever. He didn't sign anybody. He didn't go out and help the Brad Holmes scout or help the scouting team. The majority of what Rod Wood did when it came to roster building was, I will sign this check. Yes, you can use this amount of money. That's what Rod Wood did in Detroit in terms of roster building. The majority of his job was, as kind of mentioned earlier, revenue, growth in brand, and within the city as well. I think really the things that Rod can hang his hat on over the last few years was he was a major part of helping this Lions franchise get on track, get on the straight and narrow in terms of front office wise, because they were not that for a long time. And everybody knows that. You went to a Lions game in 2008, you were probably wearing a paper bag on your head and asking the Fords to sell the team. And you were probably talking about how bad Tom Luan was, or Bob Quinn, or some of these, anybody who has been a front office type guy or gal. And Wood came in and just helped get this team business wise in the right direction. And he was also a part of helping Sheila Ford realize what her expectation was going to be when she took the ownership. What Sheila really wanted to do was something that Martha didn't do, was something that Bill Ford didn't do, old Bill Ford, William Clay Ford. Neither of these guys did this sort of thing where they made the front office full of football guys. It was mostly just business people, and to some end that's okay. But Martha, or Sheila, when she took over, really wanted to have a football forward front office, and that was how Chris Spielman gets hired. That's how Brad Holmes eventually gets hired, and Dan Campbell, and then Mike Disner, and some of these guys. So that's the extent of what Rod Wood did on that end. Other than that, you love these new jerseys that you see, that's Rod Wood. You love how Ford Field is such a nice stadium and has gotten better over the years. That's Rod Wood. I think the biggest thing Rod could have done in Detroit, the biggest thing he did do in Detroit, I should say, was he got the NFL draft here. And that was such a huge win for not just the Lions, but for the city of Detroit. Just gigantic win for the city of Detroit. It just cannot be understated. And it really kind of, as best as it could, dumb people still do this, but it made people from the outside realize that Detroit isn't what, a lot of people online will try to tell you it is. It's a beautiful city. It's full of beautiful people. And I think you definitely saw that during the NFL draft, and everyone showed out in full force, and it was awesome, and it was accessible, and it was just a huge win. So big win for Rod Wood there. In terms of who could replace him, the two most popular candidates as far as internal goes, Chris Spielman is the first one. He's the special assistant to the owner and CEO at this point. He's got a very high job in the front office. He's not like, you hear assistant, you automatically think, well, that guy probably goes and fetches coffee and, sets meetings and does travel. And it's not what he's doing. He was a huge part of not only getting a football acumen into the front office of this team, but he had a final say on hiring Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell. I mean, he was one of those people, maybe not final say, but he was one of the people in the room interviewing these guys and had a big say in whether or not those guys should get hired. The only thing you worry about with Spielman is he obviously has the football acumen to be a president of football operations or something like that. But does he have the business acumen to do the job? And that's the thing I don't know, unless they've been grooming him to do it for the last few years. I don't know how Chris Spielman steps in and works as a liaison to the league and works on brand growth and revenue. And I just don't know where Chris Spielman points that towards. That's kind of the reason why I don't know if he's really the person that you could consider to get that job. The other one is Mike Disner, who, just a mathematical whiz kid, has a lot to do with how the Lions basically strategize their entire cap. It's what they do. You want to know how the Lions are able to sign Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jared Goff and Penei Sewell to these massive contracts with lower cap hits up front and adding these void years and all that stuff. Well, big part of that is Mike Disner. So he knows the numbers. He knows the kind of the business side of football. I think he is definitely someone to keep an eye on for this job. But again, does he know revenue and brand growth and can he be a liaison to the league? And it's just so much business side of this job as it is right now. We don't know what the Lions are going to do. Maybe they split them up like some of the other teams do, but I think there's a good chance that they're probably going to go look to the outside for this job and get somebody who is mostly going to be a business first hire. So that's what we got to say on the team president side of things. But let's talk about the thing that we really, the theme of this show. I really wanted to get into edge rushers. And there's a few different layers that I really want to talk about in terms of this conversation about edge rushers. The first one is we are in the season of every website out there, Bleacher Report, ESPN, SI, all of them. We're in the season of them trying to smash a player into the Lions roster without considering how much that player is going to cost and does that player fit or is that player even good anymore? And I bring up a couple examples. The first one was earlier this week when ESPN projected that Joey Bosa would fit the Detroit Lions. And I just don't see how that makes sense. Their big argument was, well, the Lions struggled on third down. That's fine. But Joey Bosa had 1 sack on third down this entire season and 21 pressures. So if the idea is that you need to get somebody in town that can help you on third down, it's not Joey Bosa. For example, Al-Quadin Muhammad had like 32 pressures and 4 sacks on third down. You want to get so, I think Muhammad is somebody that the Lions should absolutely have back, but Bosa is not an upgrade by any means. Now, if it was 2020 Bosa, then we're talking a different story, right? We're talking about a guy who's really good at getting to the quarterback. He hasn't been that guy. He had 5 sacks in 2025. He can bring some pressure. There's things he can do, but he doesn't fit the Lions. And even if you look past the pass rush point of view, in terms of stopping the run, man, he was horrible. He was really, really bad in 2025. And frankly, it's been one of his weaknesses his entire career. And then tackling, we're talking about an edge rusher who was top 5 in missed tackles last year. You don't want a guy who goes in and missed tackles. He had a 27.5 missed tackle grade, or excuse me, 27.5 tackle grade per Pro Football Focus. That's bad. That's really, really bad. So you're going to continue to see stuff like that, and you'll see other things where like a guy will get released, like Bradley Chubb just got released from the Dolphins, and you're like, a lot of people are saying, man, that guy's a multi-time Pro Bowler. Like, maybe the Dolphins are just cutting cash or whatever. Think about why the Dolphins let him go. The reality is, in 2023, he tears his ACL at the end of what was maybe the best year of his career. Misses the entire 2024 season, comes back in 2025, and struggles like crazy. Has not a very good year at all. And the Dolphins are looking at it like, well, hey, the money we're paying this guy, he's not giving us the performance that we're paying him for. So we're going to let him go. The Lions should not look at that and say, well, he'd be better here, because that's not what you want to do at this position. You want somebody who is going to be good. And a guy who has a name of names don't win games, man. And that's the thing. Like, you can't, there's room for guys who have names and still play at a high level. And if you can get them, then that's great. But if they're guys like Bradley Chubb or Joey Bosa who have clearly regressed in their game, it's just not worth it. Maybe you'll sell some jerseys or something, but you're not going to win games with guys who just can't get home and guys who are dealing with injuries and things of that nature. And like another one I saw is Bleacher Report had a trade situation where the Lions traded for Jermaine Johnson from the New York Jets. Another guy, like, I know Brad Holmes loves injured players, but like, I don't think that's accurate. I really don't believe that I think that's a narrative. Brad Holmes is not just actively trying to sign injured players. Does he sign injured players? He does. He certainly does. But there's not 53 injured players on the roster. 53 players who have a long injury history. You grab a guy and you hope that it works out. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. But if it does, then everybody goes, man, look how good Marcus Davenport is. Like, Brad Holmes is a genius for that. But that didn't happen. Davenport came in and did the same thing he has been doing his whole career, and that's get hurt. And it sucks to say, because I really thought he had a chance, and he fits what the Lions are looking for. And that's kind of what they want, is that big edge who can stop the run and can get home too. And Davenport theoretically is that if he's healthy, but again, he never is. So, yeah. You blame Detroit Syndicate for the edge rusher obsession? Yeah, that guy, man, he's anyways, so let's move on to kind of some other options here, some things that you can think about in terms of edge rusher. I would not look too much at the free agency class this year for the Lions to go find an edge. I wouldn't. Like, the only guy that you could really, if you were going to sell out, if you were going to say, we want to go and we want to get a guy who is elite and we want to spend money, we're okay with doing it, I think it's Trey Hendrickson. And I've personally been against that idea for a long time in terms of trading for him, because I don't think you give up trade assets for a player in their 30s. You're just not getting what you want to get out of that. It's just not good business, especially when you have to especially when you have to rebuild your offensive line for the most part. which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I do think that there's a possibility with Hendrickson where you can get him signed to a very super team friendly deal. And I'll actually bring up an article here that I wrote earlier today and just kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at in terms of team friendly. Let me quick share my screen. Okay, so basically, I'm sorry on TikTok, but I will try to explain this best I can. So the Athletic, Daniel Popper of the Athletic, put together a really great article that I highly recommend everybody go take a look at. It's the top 150 free agents, goes really in depth and does contract projections for everyone. For the Lions, they could potentially get Hendrickson on a 3-year, $99 million deal. That would put him at 10th exactly for edge rushers, 10th in the league in terms of edge rusher salary. But what the Lions could do is then they could take $99 million and guarantee 60 of that, guarantee $60 million of that. And they could do a lot of what they've done with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Kirby Joseph, Jared Goff, Penei Sewell, a lot of what they're doing with basically everybody that they sign. They're paying out that dead money, that guaranteed money early. So in 2026, as you can see, you're paying out $45 million of that $60 million up front. Now I know it says $30 million and $15 million here in the dead cap. That's a whole different thing. Believe me, when I tell you it's a weird situation how you explain it. So I'm not going to get fully into it because it'll be a whole show. But basically, after 2026, you have a little bit of a cap hit bump, and you really owe about 15 million more. But 2028 is really what you want to look at with Hendrickson. When you get to 2028, you're looking at a player who's going to be 33, 34 years old at that point. And realistically, he's not going to be the player that you wanted him to be anymore. So you cut him after the 2027 season. You owe very little in dead cap. You get like a $45 million cap savings. So there's reason to think about it. Like there's reason why you would think of doing something like that and bringing in one of the best edge rushers in the class to help you figure this whole thing out. And I just like that option. I don't think that the Lions do that, and you shouldn't expect the Lions to do that. You should go in to this free agency thinking of, hoping that you get surprised, but not expecting that you're going to get a big surprise, big splash signing. It's just probably not going to happen. But some other guys that I really like that I think the Lions will like, and this is all under the assumption that the Lions bring back Al-Quadin Muhammad and then draft somebody in the first round or second round. But some guys I like in free agency are Joseph Osai, who spent the year with the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a guy who gets a lot of pressure opposite Trey Hendrickson. He can get home, had about 6 or 7 sacks this year. Nothing huge, but is still younger, a player who can grow. Another guy is Seattle Seahawks Boy Mafe. He was part of a rotation in Seattle, a really good rotation in Seattle. So he wasn't a starter there, but he can be a starter in Detroit. And you could definitely bring him in, and he's still 26 years old. So it's not going to be it's not going to be a short-term type thing. You can sign him to a long-term deal, but it's not going to break the bank because he was a rotational player. But you could definitely get something out of Boy Mafe. I like Malcolm Kuntz if you want to take a chance on a guy who was injured and kind of getting over that. Malcolm Kuntz from the Raiders is somebody to watch. But if it's me, I'm going to the NFL draft, and I'm looking at the 17th pick, and I'm thinking, what do I know about this draft? Well, what I know is that I need to pull a left tackle out of this draft. But I also know a left or right tackle out of this draft, considering Penei Sewell could very well move to the left side in 2026. We don't know what's going to happen with that. Maybe we'll get some idea of that at the combine, but you know that tackle is going to be deep in this draft. You're talking about potentially getting a starting caliber left or right tackle in the second round, top of the third. If you play your cards right, I wouldn't wait that long personally. I wouldn't go farther than the second round waiting for a tackle. But this is a really deep class. We're talking like 10 guys that could really be great. So what I would do with the 17th pick is I would take one of the edge rushers that are there, because it's not going to be a very deep draft in terms of edge rushers. But there are some really good guys, some players that I really like in this draft. And let me just talk about some of those real quick. The top 5 guys, and these guys are all going to be at the combine. I highly recommend you tune in and try to gauge as much as you can get off of this in terms of, not just watching them run the 40, but watching them run all the drills and catch some of the parts of their interviews and just kind of get to know who these players are. But guys I really like, TJ Parker from Clemson is my top guy going into the NFL draft. If he's there at 17, Brad Holmes should sprint to the podium. I know, he kind of didn't play as well as he had played in 2024 this year, but this is a guy who, according to him, didn't play as well because everybody around him got better. And they were able to take advantage of the things that he was able to do. So it maybe, I guess, didn't play well is not the right way to say it. He didn't pack the stat sheet, but he absolutely packed the stat sheet. And if there were a stat sheet for this, he packed it in terms of getting players opportunities to take advantage of their one-on-one. So this is a guy you get across Aiden Hutchinson, and he could eat off Aiden's attention, and Aiden can eat off of his. So I really like TJ Parker. Cassius Howell from Texas A&M is another guy I like. 41 pressures, 11 and a half sacks last season. We know that the Lions have had their eyes on Texas A&M a little bit. They've been out. They've had scouts there a couple of times. So that's one to watch. Zion Young from Missouri is another guy I like a lot. 51 pressures, 8 sacks last year. But what really, really turns me on to him is that he has an elite run defense grade. He's such a good run defender. And that's something, as we know, the Lions really want to do and take a lot of pride in. And after last year, they definitely want to get better at that. One guy that, and shout out to the guys over at the Lions Collective, because they kind of mentioned this the other day. He was on my board before this, but really kind of made me think about this one. But Akeem Messidor from Miami, really good run defender, like really good edge rusher as well. Just can get home, can stop the run. 55 pressures and 9 sacks last year. But he's 25 years old already. So you think about that, you go, man, like he'll be 30 when his next contract comes up. But theoretically, this guy's more ready to go than anyone. So, he may be older than everybody, but he can go. He can be plug and play right now in terms, I'm not saying everybody else needs to develop for years and years. You can get something out of all these guys, but he's somebody that I think you can plug in right now, and he can play NFL football and be really good at it right at this moment. And then the last guy I'll bring up is Illinois edge rusher Gabe Hawkes. Definitely like what this guy brings to the table as well. 41 pressures and 11 and a half sacks last year. The only thing that I wonder about with Hawkes is that he's kind of like he's like a power edge rusher. He's gonna bull rush you, and he's pretty good at that. But he really needs to develop some of the other moves and some more technique and stuff like that, just to kind of get better at his game. But he's definitely got the strength. He kind of reminds me of, and rest in peace. He reminds me of Marshawn Nealon a little bit, and that's what I liked about Marshawn a lot going into that draft, and that's why I mocked him to the Lions so many times, is because that dude could bull rush just about anybody. He was the kind of guy that would push a tackle into the quarterback as a sack. That's like power. but he was able to develop some technique as well. So, and I think that's what Hawkins needs to do too. So those are the edge rushers I'm looking at. I think that those guys are pretty good. And again, if I'm Brad Holmes, my offseason move is to bring back Al-Quadin Muhammad, maybe sign a guy like Osai to be part of a rotation, and then draft somebody in the first round. Let's see. Franklin S. Douglas says Ahmed Hassanin. I love Ahmed Hassanin. Believe me, a really big fan of Ahmed Hassanin, and just somebody with such an incredible story, man. If you haven't read this guy's his story, like this, it's a Disney movie. Like this dude he comes from Egypt and just like he wasn't even going to go to college to play football, just winds up in an all-star game and has colleges going, wait, who's that guy over there? And then just figures it out, man. Such a cool story. It almost didn't even happen. So I highly recommend you guys read up on him. But the thing about Hassanin is like he plays with his hair on fire, and I know Dan Campbell really likes that, but he still needs to learn. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things he needs to learn. That there are times when you want to kind of dial it back just a little bit, be a little bit more patient, a little more intentional with your moves, and there's just nuances to the game that he needs to figure out. And plus, he needs reps. Like that's the biggest thing. He's not played NFL football outside of 2.5 preseason games, so he needs to come in, have another training camp, which he basically missed half of last year's, and he needs to get practice and some regular season reps. I wouldn't expect to see much of Hassanin really as a full contributor until probably 2027, and that's kind of disappointing, but that's just the way it goes, man. Next year is basically going to be his rookie year. So then we got. You think Muhammad's going to be too expensive? Now, like this is a take I keep seeing, that Al-Quadin Muhammad is going to want a lot of money. Here's the thing, man. Like Al-Quadin Muhammad could want all the money in the world, but he's not going to get it. He was really good last year, and he opened some eyes to how good he can be, but he's going to be 31 years old, and he has one really good year on his resume. And it's just a little too late in the game for him to capitalize on that one good year. And I think he could stack some more years. I think there's more that you can get out of him. Believe me, I'm not saying that Al-Quadin Muhammad is a one and done type guy. I think you can get more. I thought he played really well in 2024 as well. But we're talking about a guy who's bounced around, has never really had a major contract. Could he get the most that he's ever gotten? Yeah, absolutely. But I think we're looking at something like 2 years, 25 million maybe at tops. I don't think that he's not going to get a giant contract, guys. Like it's just not going to happen. And if he does, I will be shocked. And if he does, I will be the first person to say that team who gave him a major max type deal is the most insane team in the world, and their GM should be fired. Like, I'm not saying that again. I'm not saying Muhammad's a bad player, because he's not. But you just have to understand the situation. Let's say I may be ignorant, but I feel over $10 million is too much. It's really not. When people see contract numbers, and I get it. Like it's understandable why people would do this. Like when I was talking about Trey Hendrickson's deal earlier, I said 99 million, and I think some people focus on that 99 million and they go, "Man, that's really expensive." But when you break that down over 3 years and you get into the realm of guaranteed money and all that, you're talking about cap hits that aren't really that high, and it's just it's really not that much. 10 million, if you were to like guarantee 6 of that, you're talking about cap hits that are going to be like $2 million. So it's really not. 10 million would be underpaying him for sure. I think he can get 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, something like that. but he's not going to get paid a huge amount of money. But he will get paid probably the most that he's ever gotten paid. So yeah, that's kind of like what I'm thinking about edge rushers at this point. Center, Franklin S. Douglas, I like your name, Franklin, says we need a center, and he's absolutely right. You meant per year, Dylan. Sorry. Yeah, $10 million per year that's a lot of money. I don't think he gets that though. I really don't. I think they guarantee a lot of money, and he gets kind of lower cap hit. I don't see that happening. But back to Franklin, we need a center, absolutely. And this is where you want to go in free agency. You need to find your next center in a couple of weeks. And we don't know who that's going to be just yet. It could, I know everyone wants Tyler Linderbaum. Like, I totally understand it. Tyler Linderbaum is the golden goose of this free agency class in terms of center, but I just so highly doubt that he will ever be there. It would be shocking if he actually makes it to the market. And I think the thing that maybe confuses people is that, well, the Ravens decided not to pay for his fifth-year option. They didn't do that because he's not a good player. They did that because tackles, guards, and centers all get lumped into the same category when it comes to franchise tags or fifth-year options. So when you're paying a fifth-year option for a center, you're paying him the same amount of money a tackle would get. So it's like $23 million. And it's guaranteed completely. You can't restructure it. You can't do anything with it. So he would theoretically in 2026, had they picked up his fifth-year option, have a $23 million cap hit. That is a lot for a center. That's a lot for any center. No center has a cap hit like that, basically. And the Ravens are thinking, well, we're going to not pay you this fifth-year option, but we're going to make it up to you on the contract. We're going to make you the highest paid center in the NFL, and we'll get you a lot of guaranteed money on there, and you're going to be set. And that's basically what's happening here. So they're probably not going to bring in Tyler Linderbaum because they're just never going to have a shot at him. Connor McGovern from Buffalo is a guy who I think is a possibility to be there, a much higher possibility than Linderbaum. He is 28 years old. He's a little bit older. So it's just going to depend on, do the Bills want to get younger at the position? And if they do, then maybe that makes McGovern available. I see Brandon Clark here on TikTok. His thoughts on Cade Mays. I think Cade Mays is the best opportunity the Lions are going to have. I mean, that is the guy I think they wind up with ultimately. And if he winds up making it to free agency, which I believe he will, I think there's a real shot that the Panthers don't try to bring him back. And if he does, if he does make it, I think the Lions need to go all in on him, provided that Linderbaum and McGovern are truly not there, which I don't think they will. But Mays is a pretty good center, and this guy hasn't allowed a sack in 2 years. Low on the allowed pressures, and definitely a guy I would keep an eye on for sure going into this. Froholt, I'm seeing from here on Facebook or YouTube rather. Froholt is somebody that you like, a bridge center, kind of the same idea as McGovern, only probably not as good, but he does have experience with Drew Petzing in Arizona, was with him there for a few years, understands what Petzing's run game is all about and what it takes to be a center in Petzing's offense. So that's certainly an idea, but you're relying on whether or not the Cardinals are going to either A, trade him to you, or B, they're going to use him as a casualty. I think more likely they would trade him. So, but if you can get him, he's great, and he's a guy that you maybe sign or trade for, and then have play center for you for a couple of years, and draft somebody in this year's draft that can grow over the next few years, and we'll see what happens there. Seth McLaughlin is another guy that my guy J Rod's over here asked about McLaughlin's an interesting one because this guy was the Remington Award winner in 2024 at Ohio State. That's the award for the best center in college football. They don't just give that out to anybody. And the fact that he didn't get drafted even in a late round, like basically no centers went in last year's draft. It's just crazy. And, you know, he was over in Cincinnati, and they chose not to really do anything with him. The Lions picked him up on a futures deal. It's kind of a let's see what he can do in camp thing. I would not expect Seth McLaughlin to be a starting center in this league, not this year at least. I mean, maybe he's one of those guys who's kind of a diamond in the rough and he just kind of figures it out. But you got to see what it is that you're working with first. Can he be an NFL player? And that's going to take time at training camp, and let's see him play in some preseason games and see what he has. But you can't. It would be a major risk to say, hey, we don't need to go for a free agent or we don't need to trade for anybody. We'll just see what we got out of this guy. But I do like the idea of him. I look forward to seeing what he can do for sure. But let's see what else we got here. I did want to talk about the offensive line just a little bit more before we get out of here. Just some interesting thing, you know, like the way we talk about how this offensive line played in 2025, we talk about it like, man, this was the worst offensive line that ever existed. And then I got to look at I'm going to share my screen here. I got to look at the pressure rates for the Lions offensive line today. And man, it really wasn't that bad. You know, it just wasn't. It wasn't as bad as I expected it to be. You had Taylor Decker was 15th in the league. Christian Mahogany was 29th. But I think there's some nuance to that because the thing about Mahogany was that he was pretty good before the injury. When he came back, I think it was pretty clear he was not fully healed. And you could see that. And the majority of the sacks and pressure that he allowed this season were after coming back from that injury. So I think maybe there's some nuance to that one. Graham Glasgow, 7th among centers in pressure rate percentage. That's like way better than I think anybody expected. Tate Ratledge, 9th as a rookie. I think, man, keeping Tate Ratledge at right guard has got to be one of your priorities this year. I know there's talk about maybe moving him to center, but man, I wouldn't do it. Penei Sewell, 4th. And there's no surprise there because he's one of the best tackles in the NFL, all pro. Get a little water there. But I also want to jump into this article here because somebody asked me to take a look at the difference between pressures and sacks in 2024 and pressures and sacks in 2025. And I thought this one was really interesting too because you look at 2024, the Lions, which we all considered the Lions' 2024 offensive line to be the best offensive line in the league. We all talked about it, right? 2024, they allowed 201 pressures. In 2025, they allowed just 14 more pressures. And then in 2024, they allowed 33 sacks. And then in 2025, they allowed just 6 more sacks. So, like, that was kind of shocking to see because, again, we've have this mindset like this, you know, this is the worst offensive line in the league. And I'm not saying that the Lions don't need to go out and get a better center and get a new left tackle, but like, man, maybe we're a little bit crazy when we thought this team was way off, you know, like it was all over, the window's closed and everything's bad. There's some nuance that I think is really important. I think that the nuance that you really want to talk about there is, well, first off, Jared Goff is a lot better at avoiding sacks than you think he is. He's was 13th in pressure to sack percentage last year. That is that measures the amount of pressures that turn into a sack. So 13th in that, and that was above Josh Allen, you know, who had 18 allowed. Josh Allen got sacked 18.6% of the time he was pressured. Jared Goff was sacked 17% of the time he was pressured. And I think that just says a lot because what does everybody always think? Well, man, Josh Allen is mobile as hell. Like he could just get away from anything. But clearly he's He's not getting away from everything. He was sacked more than Jared Goff was last year, and even while he's getting away, he's still getting sacked. He's just getting sacked in a different area, basically. So, do I think he's better under pressure than Jared Goff? Maybe. Yeah, I think he's probably better when somebody's in their face. But I think Jared Goff is way better at avoiding these sacks than anybody gives him credit for. And then I also think, there's probably some recency bias to the thoughts on the offensive line, because you look at that Vikings game, it was really bad. And I mean, Jared Goff was getting hit left and right, had no time to throw. It was one of the worst offensive line performances we've probably ever seen. And I think that's really stuck in everyone's head. That's a nationally televised game. Everybody saw it. It was embarrassing. But you got to factor in that Kingsley Equan, I don't know. I don't have to say it anymore. He was only in there for his second start in NFL history, in his NFL career, I should say. Christian Mahogany coming off of a injury just a couple weeks earlier. Taylor Decker didn't play that game. It was bad. And then you got a rookie right guard on the other side, and you, of course, have Penei Sewell. So, yeah, man, of course that offensive line played pretty bad. And, I just think that there was just a lot of nuance to the whole thing. I thought it was worth talking about. Maybe the offensive line wasn't really as bad as we thought it was, but they should still go get their left tackle, get their center in free agency. And then coming back in 2026, they should be so much better, just ready to go. I saw somebody ask about Wyatt Teller on here. The thing about Wyatt Teller is that he is primarily played right guard, and I just don't think you want to take that spot away from Tate Ratledge. Now, if you're going to move Ratledge to center, if you're gung-ho and dead set on doing that, well, then, yeah, maybe it makes a little bit more sense to think about Teller as a potential free agent for the Lions. But I just don't know. Like, he has played left guard. It was very early in his career that he did it. But I don't know if he can necessarily still do that. And the other thing is, it's a very similar situation to what we were talking about with Joey Bosa, Bradley Chubb. Teller's not bad, but he's not Wyatt Teller of like 2020, 2021 when he was an all-pro and, one of the best tackles in the league. He's just not that player anymore. But again, like if they want to maybe sign him to play left guard and say, hey, take a little bit of time there, Mahogany, then, hey, like that's not a horrible idea. But I just don't think that they're going to do that. So before we get out of here, I do want to I do want to, I was reading a comment that said messed up. Brad Holmes messed up letting CD leave. And I registered it in my head and I said messed up for some reason. I want to read a couple of Instagram comments and see if I can answer some questions over there. Let's see. Taylor Decker is not retiring. Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Cameron Jordan on a 1-year deal. Cameron Jordan, as far as I know, is not a free agent. And he's made it pretty plain and clear he has no intentions to ever leave New Orleans. So I wouldn't think about that one anymore. Let's see what else we got. But yeah, back to that comment about Brad Holmes messing up, letting CD leave, Carlton Davis, and somebody saying DJ Reed is not a quarterback one. I think there's some nuance there too, similar to the Christian Mahogany thing I was talking about earlier. DJ Reed actually played really well before the injury, and when he came back, he was clearly hampered by that. And that's the crappy part about this whole thing, is that you hope that guys can get healthy and they can come back and just get right back on their game. And sometimes they can, and sometimes they can't. But I did think Carlton Davis had a great year for the New England Patriots. Was really good in the playoffs for them. And, even at that point, I was like, man, kind of looks better if they have him. But I don't think that anybody should be giving up on DJ Reed just yet. So Yeah, that's what we got. Somebody in here said that you love my content. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Um, yeah, so that's what we're going to do for today's show.